There it goes.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to a exciting episode of Eggs. This week, we've got special guest Josh Steimle. Josh is the author of an upcoming book. It's available for pre-order now. It's called 60 Days to LinkedIn Mastery. He is a accomplished author, speaker, all kinds of things. And actually, I don't want to, we're a little bit late starting, so I don't want to dig too deep and waste too much time introducing. I'd rather just get right into the conversation. So welcome to the show. Without any further ado, our guest Josh Steimle.
Hey, Josh, how's it going?
Good. Thanks, guys, for having me on.
Yeah, sorry we threw the camera on him last minute. I don't think he was ready for the video aspect. So sorry about that, Josh.
I'm down for anything, even if I am wearing my pajamas.
Thank you again for being flexible on your time. We kind of canceled on you last minute for a Princess of Norway visit, and thanks for being funny about that and willing to reschedule.
Anything for the Princess of Norway.
Killer. All right. Well, hey, Josh, let's go ahead and get started. So the premise of this show basically is that we try and talk about sort of people's eggs, so to speak, and talk about their career or their life process sort of from coop to table, so to speak. And so the idea is we try and analyze sort of this creative thread that runs through each of us and how we manifest it in our own ways. So we'll talk to everyone from startup founders to touring musicians, anybody who uses this sort of creative juice for some creative endeavor. And in your case, it's entrepreneurship, it's personal branding, and a number of other things. So it's really intriguing. But to sort of do this coop to table transition, let's talk a little bit about who you are and where you came from.
Sure thing. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California, youngest of 4 kids. My dad was a rocket scientist, and my mom was a school teacher and a bit of an artist as well. And grew up down there, went to college in Idaho, and served a mission for my church as a missionary in Brazil. And came back, got married, started a business just like everybody else was doing in 1999. And that business is MWI. It's a marketing agency. And that's the only job I've ever had longer than 5 months. Every other job I got bored of or I got fired from.
That sounds very familiar. I have got the same problem. Whenever I have a boss, it doesn't end well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, now I have 50 bosses. So
right.
And so I've been running this agency for the past 20 years. And then a few years ago, around 2013, I got the opportunity to write for Forbes magazine, and that opened a whole new world for me. I didn't know I was a writer until I started doing that, and I just fell in love with it. And that led to a book deal, and it led to speaking opportunities and helped me grow my business. And I ended up writing for about 25 different business publications, Forbes, Fortune, Time, Inc.,
Wow.
just all these places. And it just took me on this whirlwind around the world. I ended up living in Hong Kong and most recently China. I moved back from China in February, so now I'm living in Boston. But it all goes back to writing, and it's just been a huge blessing for me.
That's amazing. Can you talk about that first initial article that you did for Forbes, and kind of like the time frame after that first one got kind of out there to when you started getting, hit up more frequently and you start getting the speaking deals, and just that kind of time frame, the initial time frame when it kind of popped off for you?
Yeah, well, it was kind of one of these 10-year overnight success things. I had been writing for years. I had a blog back in 2002 or something, before blogging was really a thing. And I had written 1,000 blog posts, but nobody cared about them because I was just some guy in Provo, Utah, spouting whatever I felt like writing about. And so I was writing all these blog posts, and I'm running this digital marketing agency. And then my digital marketing agency took a turn for the worst. We hired somebody as an account manager, and he wasn't very good at managing accounts. And we lost all our clients except for 3.
Oh, wow.
And we were on the verge of bankruptcy. And I went to my friend, Cheryl Snap Connor, who's a PR person there in Utah, and said, hey, what can I do here? I need help from any source that I can get it. Is there anything I can do on the PR front to help my business get some clients back and save this thing? And she said, well, you like blogging, you enjoy writing, you should be writing for these publications, for these business magazines. And this had never occurred to me before. I thought that was something that journalists did. People who go to the Columbia School of Journalism or something. And I'm just a guy running a business. So I said, well, how does that work? I mean, yeah, I like writing. She said, oh, here's how it works. And she got me an article in Fast Company, which was my first article in a big magazine. And that felt really good. But it was all through her. She shepherded that process. So all I know is that I wrote the article and she got it in. But then I noticed that Cheryl was writing for Forbes and had this weekly column. So I asked her, hey, how does this work? And she said, oh, Forbes has this contributor program. And I was like, what's a contributor? And she said, well, there are staff writers who work for Forbes, and then there are these contributors who write for Forbes for free. And we do it because of the exposure it gives us. And she said, hey, my editor's coming to town in 2 weeks. You want an introduction? I almost said no, because I was so busy trying to save my business. But thankfully, I kept my mouth shut and said, sure, I'd love to meet your editor. Met him 2 weeks later. He said, hey, I saw your Fast Company article. I've seen your blog. We want you to write for us. Will you do this? And I said, yeah, I guess, sure. So it just dropped in my lap. So then I started writing for Forbes. And at first, I was just writing about entrepreneurship and nothing was happening. But then I noticed that, one, I wasn't getting any results. I mean, I was getting feedback and people liked the articles, but it wasn't doing anything for my business. And I couldn't justify the time unless there was some benefit I was getting out of it, other than just having fun writing. And I also noticed that there were a lot of other people running marketing agencies, writing for Forbes and talking about marketing. They weren't promoting their businesses, but they were talking about marketing. So I thought, well, I'm going to try writing about marketing, just see what happens. And that was the turning point, because once I started writing about marketing, then people started reading my articles. They liked them and they said, who is this guy? And then when they looked me up, they saw, oh, he's got a marketing agency. And then they would come and they'd hire my agency. And our business just blew up. Over the next few years, we were able to track over $5 million in revenue to articles I wrote on Forbes. So it was just huge.
How did you track them? Did you use like Bitly?
No, we just asked people. We just said, how'd you find us? Or they'd tell us, they'd say, hey, I read your article in Forbes and we want to hire you. I mean, it was that easy. I just hired this person on to do sales, Corey Blake. He's now the CEO of the company. And he had experience doing summer sales. So he had worked for Vivint and these sales companies, knocking doors the hard way. And he's like, this is like walking down the street and people are running out of their doors and saying, can I please buy from you? He's like, this is amazing. I've never had a sales experience like this.
Nice.
So with that Forbes brand and the other publications I got into, it just created this flood of attention that turned into business and helped us to grow. And now we've got an office in Hong Kong and we've got office in Europe, and we've got people across the US. And it's just been this amazing journey. And then, yeah, it led to a book deal because I was able to go to a publisher and say, hey, I write for these publications. I want to write this book. And they accepted my pitch. And then I was able to do a TEDx talk. And then my book came out and somebody read it and invited me to go spend a week on Richard Branson's private island with him. I mean, it's just this crazy roller coaster. I'm just a guy running a small business who enjoys writing, sort of, and all of a sudden all this stuff has happened. It was just amazing. But there was like 10 or 15 years of hard work before that when it wasn't that fun.
Well, yeah, that was one of the things I wanted to touch on, and it was all the way back at the very beginning of that soliloquy. But it was this idea of the 10-year overnight success. I think the internet breeds such a concept in people's mind that they can just go and things are just going to pop and happen overnight. I think it was interesting that you pointed out that you'd actually been grinding it out for a decade prior to any kind of success. I think that's just an interesting thing to point out. As far as getting into these programs and stuff, you mentioned having like a PR, a friend here in Utah that does PR. What do you think? I mean, I think a lot of people, especially in this sort of internet economy, try and do things themselves versus bringing on people, or experts in this sort of thing. What are your thoughts on bringing on a PR person to help you out? Or like, could you have done this on your own, or do you really need the expertise of someone else to do it?
Most people can do this stuff on their own. But it's a question of, is that really the best use of your time? I mean, I can change the oil on my car, but I pay somebody else to do it because I've got
horrible
better things to do.
Last week with an oil change.
Don't bring up the, we won't use their name, but
I don't want to get sued, but one of the common,
we'll just say J Lube to keep
that one, yeah.
Yeah. Keep it anonymous.
I think I got in motor oil in my brake line because of my last change, and it cost me about $1,000.
Yeah, somebody wasn't paying attention.
Yeah.
I'm gonna actually start maybe doing my own oil now.
Well, it's similar with PR. Like there are good agencies out there, there are bad agencies out there. And as a writer writing for these publications, I get all the pitches from the agencies. So I see how many bad pitches come in because I'm getting all these bad pitches. I'm like, man, somebody's getting paid to send me this stuff and pitch me on this stuff. It's amazing what you can create a business around. So yeah, but if you can find the right people to do PR, in a lot of cases, it is better to outsource it, but there are still situations where it's better to keep it in house. Number one, sometimes you just can't afford to outsource it. You're small, you're just getting started, your business just starting to move. You can't go to a PR firm and pay them a $10,000 a month retainer. It's just, you just don't have the money to do it. So you have to hustle and you have to scramble and you have to figure out how to do it yourself. And there are tools out there like Help a Reporter and all sorts of other things where you can figure out how to do it yourself, but it takes time. And really what a PR agency is selling is relationships. They know the people. So like my agency, we do PR. So we know people. So when somebody comes to us and says, I want to get an article in Inc. magazine, we already know the people at Inc. to pitch, and we know how to pitch them, and we know how to not to bug them and not to tick them off.
So
They'll listen to us.
what are some examples of things that people do that bug them or tick them off? And what's a normal pitch for an article look like? Is it a rough draft and say, hey, do you want me to expound on this, or what does that usually go into?
Yeah, so our process is we sit down with a client, we say, okay, what do you want to accomplish? What do you want from this article? Are you just building your brand and you want people to know who you are? Are you looking to generate leads and sales? Are you trying to grow your business? What's the point of this article? Once we have that, we say, okay, what kind of article is going to get you the results that you want? Is it a feature article? Is it a topical article? What is going to attract your audience and get them to react the way that you want them to react? Once we have that, then we brainstorm a few topics. We say, okay, what about this headline? What about this headline? We come up with a few topics. And then what we do is we go to the writer that we know at Inc. or Entrepreneur or Forbes or wherever, and we say, hey, we've got an article we're working on. Here are a few ideas for a headline. Do you like any of these? And we'll get their feedback. And they might say, yeah, I really like this headline. That would be an interesting article. I'd be interested in seeing that one. So then we go and rewrite the article. We take it back to our clients, say, here's our article that we're going to pitch. Do you approve it? Do you like it? And they say, yay, nay, we revise it, whatever we need to do. Then we take it back to our writer friend and we say, hey, here's this article. And then the writer says, yeah, I like it. No, I don't like it. I like it, but I'm going to revise it a bit or whatever they want to do. And there's a bunch of back and forth there in the process. And then eventually we get that article submitted and approved, but it might not go live for a few weeks. And this is where most people make the big mistake when they're doing their own PR. If they get that far and they get the article in there and it's in the queue, it's going to be published, it's all lined up, then they start bugging the writer. And they're sending them an email every day saying, hey, when's that going live? When's that going live? Hey, is that live yet? And what can happen here is the writer might say, man, this person's really annoying me. I'm doing them a huge favor by publishing this article about them, and they're bugging me to death about when it's going to go live. I'm going to yank it. I'm not going to publish it anymore, and I'm just not going to communicate with them anymore.
Yeah.
So this is where a lot of people make the mistake, is they just bug that guy too much. Once it's in the queue, it's good. It's going live. Just let it be and wait for it to go live. Sometimes this takes a month or something, but that's where a lot of people mess up.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I think a lot of people, especially if this is your first article or your first opportunity, you might feel that inclination to kind of, jump on somebody or really hound them to try and get published. So I think that's fair advice. I guess then that might be a good place to transition into some of this personal brand development. One of the reasons people might be writing articles, could be to promote a business, but one of the areas you specialize in is in personal brand development, developing, yourself as an expert in a field. Can you talk a little bit about that process, how that works, why people might choose to do it?
Yeah, well, the reason the people I know choose to do it is generally they've read something on my blog or they've heard my story and they're like, okay, so you generated $5 million for your business based off of essentially thought leadership and your personal brand. I want to do that. How can I get $5 million for my business? And so people are coming to me and they're saying, teach me how to do what you did for your business because that's what I want to do for my business. a lot of other people come and they say, I want to learn how to do what you did, but it's not the money. It's, I want to give back. I have something, some experience. I have this knowledge in my head, and I know that a lot of people can use it, and I want to get it out there. But I don't know if I should write a book or if I should be speaking or do a TEDx talk. What should I be doing to get that knowledge out there? So these are the type of people that come to me and that I work with. And over the past few years, I've been doing research on highly influential people throughout history, people who have impacted the world in really dramatic ways, including the bad ones and the good ones. But I'm looking at Hitler. I'm also looking at Oprah and everything in between. So looking at these influential people, I came up with this framework called the 7 Systems of Influence that everybody who's highly influential taps into most of these 7 things, if not all 7 things. And the first one is your vision, just having an idea of what you're going after. What do you want to accomplish?
That is actually, I've been working with a business coach right now and working on getting like your vision statement, mission statement, all that figured out. It's amazing how much that clarifies it for you when I put it like a dartboard. Now you actually have a target to throw at if you have the vision and know what you want to do. Huge eye opener.
Well, yeah, and it's funny how many people go into business without even having that idea. They may do something as a trade and that becomes a business, but to actually have a vision or have a mission is kind of a something that's maybe not as common as it should be.
Yeah, and it seems like common sense when you think about it, right? You're like, well, yeah, duh. Like, I should have a goal.
You have to know where you're going if you're going to get there.
Yeah, and yet we so often fall into things because we see something and we think, oh, I can do that. And we just start doing it. We don't really think about, well, why am I doing this? What's the point? What's the long-term vision here? Which leads to the second part, which is there's a great book out there called The Big Leap by a guy named Gay Hendricks. And in this book, he talks about this idea of a zone of genius and how we all have things that we're good at, but then we also have a mission or something that makes us really unique and special. And we should spend our time on that thing that makes us special, not the things that we're merely good at. For example, I know a lot about marketing because I've run a marketing agency for 20 years. But there are 100,000 other people out there who have run a marketing agency for 20 years, and they know just as much about marketing as I do. So just because I know a lot about marketing, that doesn't really make me that special. And I grew up skateboarding, so I know a lot about skateboarding, but there are 20 million other skateboarders in the world, so that doesn't make me that special either. But if I overlap those two things and I say, who in the world knows as much about marketing the way that I do and skateboarding the way that I do, there might be 10 people in the world that have that overlap of expertise that I do. So if I wanted to make that my genius zone, I could go to Adidas, I could go to Nike, and I could say, hey, I can really help you sell shoes to skateboarders because I know the marketing side. I also know the skateboarding side like nobody else does. And that could be my genius zone. So the genius zone helps us to focus on things that matter most and get rid of things that we might be good at, but it's not something that's really unique. And I have this tendency I have shiny object syndrome. I look at stuff and I'm like, oh, I could do that. And I jump over there and I start doing it. And then I see something else and I start doing that. And soon I'm doing 10 things and none of them well. And I realize, what am I doing here? I'm doing all these things. I'm doing things just to make money that I don't even care about. I really should be focused on my zone of genius. And that zone of genius keeps me grounded, helps me to stay focused on something.
Yeah, I think that's key because I mean, speaking from my personal experience, but I assume that other people have it too, is, I mean, this ability to stay focused, just what you described about sort of, I see many things that I'm capable of doing. And so we try and offer those as services, and we try and do those as different, aspects of our business. We run an advertising marketing agency as well. And so I'm sure that you and I have some similarities in those things. And so, but I came from sort of the creative direction, art direction side. So I was an artist first and have fallen into having to run the business versus starting as a business person or a marketer and moving into it. And so I've got a little bit of a different angle, but so my impulse is to be the jack of all trades, the guy that can do everything, instead of being the guy that does one thing really well or a handful of things really well.
Yep. Yeah, I fell into the same trap because I come from a design background too. And so in the early days of my agency, I was designing all the websites. And then it got to this point where it was like, well, when I started writing, it was, well, should Josh be writing articles for Forbes or should he be designing websites? And I decided to write articles for Forbes, and we hired somebody else to do the design, and that was a good move because there's no way I could have generated millions of dollars of revenue based on my design skills. They
Sure,
weren't
yeah.
that good.
Well, and actually where we're at too, it's sort of we're in that exact same transitionary moment where we're hiring most things done now, and I'm creative directing still just because, I can't completely get out of it yet. But, so I still work as creative director in our firm, but then the rest of my day I spend, out, shaking hands, meeting people. Our firm is really relationship focused. And so that's, what we're doing is trying to build relationships with local businesses and people and try and develop, business that way. And but it's been a struggle. I mean, this idea, sort of this, tweener business that we are, where we're trying to go from being, I guess, sort of the technician or the guy that actually does the work to now leading a team and doing some of these other things that I wasn't necessarily trained for. I mean, I've done creative direction in ad agencies, so I've led teams and stuff like that to some extent, but actually being the employer or being the boss is a different role. And so I have some difficulty, stepping away and not slipping back into, well, I could just do it myself faster, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so it's been a bit of a struggle. And so it's interesting to hear some of these things that you've gone through because, we're knee deep in them right now.
Yeah. And if you're a nice guy, it's hard to say no, right? People come to you and they're like, hey, you can do this really quick, right? Can you just do this? And you're like, oh, sure, I'll just do it because I'm a nice guy. And then you get pulled every which way and you get stuck doing stuff and you're not doing the stuff that you were born to do.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's really the thing, I mean, for the longest time, and actually it took me a long time to come to the realization that one of the things holding back my company was that I'm actually the bottleneck in it. People were hiring me, but they were hiring me. They weren't hiring my firm. They didn't care about my firm. They were coming for me. And so I was kind of the bottleneck. I would hire people to work with me and work around me and stuff like that. But those folks, were just an extension of me. Like all the business was still coming through me. And so that made it really difficult for me to step aside and allow others to just do the work. And, so we've done some version of this, but, it's really interesting hearing all this transitionary stuff now, especially because I've been writing for the last year too. So it's kind of funny, we're falling into the same path.
Yeah. Cool. Well, going back to those 7 systems of influence. So we talked about vision, genius zone. Third area is your audience or your ideal audience. You have somebody out there who really cares about what you have. And there are people you can sell to, and then there are people who must have what you want. So if I'm selling life coaching services for $5,000 a month, college students probably aren't my audience. Maybe rich people are a better audience for me to go after. So we all have an ideal audience who really wants what our genius zone is, and finding that audience and connecting our genius zone with that audience is going to make magic happen. So audience is critical. Number 4 is content, and everything's content. Our examples content, your podcast is content, your writing's content, everything we do is content. And the question is, what's the message that we're trying to communicate to our audience so that they do what we want them to do? And what's the best channel to deliver that message? Is it video delivered through YouTube? Is it writing delivered through LinkedIn? Is it audio delivered via podcast? How do we reach our audience with the content that we have? People who are highly influential, they have the right content matched up with the right audience focused on their genius zone. And then number 5, system 5 is action. So it's having a plan that makes this all work so that you get up and every day you do something, and that action plan makes the content, connects you with your audience, fulfills your genius zone. And then 6 and 7 are kind of follow on. Like the first 5 systems are essential. The next 2, it's not that they're not essential, but they're different than the first 5. So the next 2 are collaboration. You can get a lot more influence if you work with other people rather than trying to go it alone. And then number 7 is love. It's empathy. It's understanding your audience. It's caring about them. It's knowing where they're coming from. My partner, he once said to me that we were talking about parenting because we're both parents of young children, and we're at that stage where sometimes as a parent, you feel like you're just messing your child up and you're dooming them to this life of just dreariness and unhappiness because of all the mistakes you make as a parent. And we were just talking about this, and he was saying, if your kids know that you love them, it covers up a lot of mistakes, because you can do everything wrong as a parent. But if your child knows that your heart's in the right place and that you're trying to help them out, they'll forgive you for a lot of mistakes that you might make. And that stuck with me. And so it's the same with influencing anybody, whether it's your kids or a business partner or your clients. If they know that you're coming from the right place, they'll forgive a lot of mistakes. If they don't think you're coming from the right place, then they won't forgive a single mistake. So you see people like Travis Kalanick with Uber. As soon as he got into trouble, he was out of there. I mean, he got fired pretty quickly after getting into trouble at Uber because he was kind of a jerk to people, and people felt like, this is not a guy who cares. This is not a guy who's got love. And so he was out of there. Whereas Richard Branson has been hit by all sorts of scandals, entire books written trying to take him down, and nothing sticks to him because he's this happy, smiley guy that everybody wants to hang out with. And you feel like he cares. And so the difference between caring and not caring, or at least being perceived as caring, is huge when it comes to influencing people and being able to maintain that influence. So there you go, 7 systems of influence.
So what book is that in?
It's not out yet. I'm working on it. So
okay. Is that the LinkedIn Mastery? Is it in that book?
I talk about this in my new book, LinkedIn Mastery, or I have a new book coming out called 60 Days to LinkedIn Mastery. It's like a lesson a day on LinkedIn. And in there is the most complete version of these 7 systems of influence. It's part of the introduction of the book. But after 60 Days to LinkedIn Mastery, then I'll start writing this book, 7 Systems of Influence. And hopefully that comes out in the next year or two.
Nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess then let's sort of continue down this path of personal branding or personal, I don't know if we want to call it content creation or whatever it is, but let's talk a little bit more about how one might go down this path. So we talked about writing and things like that. We talked about some public speaking, but can you maybe get a little bit more granular on how, one might chase this sort of thing down? So if you wanted to begin public speaking, what sorts of paths would you take, for example?
Well, the key is to not get too invested in anything until you've tried it out and tested it and you know that that's the thing to go into. I mean, you might have an inkling that, hey, maybe public speaking is a good thing for me, but you can invest a lot of money and time into public speaking and then find out this isn't generating any leads for my business, or it's not getting me to whatever my vision is. And now you've just spent a lot of time and wasted it there. So is there a way for you to test out speaking? Is there a way for you to test out social media? Is there a way for you to test out writing to see if that kind of works, so that then you can go in full force and really invest your time and money into it? So before anybody jumps into something and really commits themselves, that's my first word of caution, is just try to test things out and see what works for you first, and test out a lot of things. So for me, I didn't realize that writing was my thing. It took me years to figure that out. But once I found it, I knew that writing was it, because I saw the connection I was making with people and I loved it. I felt like I would write even if nobody listened or nobody was reading. And I don't feel that same way about video. I would not record videos of myself speaking if there weren't some business reason to do it. But I would write stuff even if nobody were listening. So that's another sign that, hey, this is a match for you, because in the 7 systems of influence, I talked about you've got to find the right channel for your audience. Where's your audience hanging out? What are they reading? I wrote articles for Forbes, and then I would take those articles and I'd write them for Entrepreneur, or more or less the same article. And I would get huge response on Forbes and no response on Entrepreneur, because my audience was on Forbes, and evidently my audience for that topic I was writing about was not on Entrepreneur. So in figuring out that channel, that's half the equation. But what if I don't like writing at all? If I hate writing, I shouldn't be trying to get stuff in Forbes, even if that is where my audience is, because it's just not going to happen. It's not my thing. If I love video, I've got to figure out how to get video in front of my audience, or how to find a video channel where my audience is hanging out, because video is just my thing, or audio is my thing, or whatever is your thing. So there are those 2 sides to the equation: the channel that your audience prefers and the channel that you prefer to work in, or the medium that you prefer to work in.
Nice. Can you expound on your writing process? Do you have like a set schedule during the day that you write from 10 to 2, or is it just kind of whenever a thought comes to your head, or what's your weekly schedule like?
So I have an ideal week set up in my Google Calendar, and everything's planned out, and then I totally ignore it. So
about right.
I mean, seriously, it's there, but you could see it. And I don't think I've ever matched up with that schedule once. And yet I still keep creating and maintaining this ideal schedule. But my process is very, I would say chaotic, a little bit ad hoc. I mean, I have a to-do list every day and I'm like, okay, I got to get this stuff done today and I need to write a blog post. So one thing I stick to is I send out a monthly email news or a weekly email newsletter, and that goes out on Tuesdays. So I know that Monday is my blog post writing day because that's what goes out in my email newsletter the next day. If it weren't for the fact that I am committed to that and I've built up that expectation with my subscribers, I probably wouldn't blog every Monday because I'd be like, I'm too busy today. I'll let this go for tomorrow, or I'm just not feeling the inspiration today. But because I have that deadline, it forces me to write every Monday and get at least one blog post out every week. So that's kind of my system is I put myself into a bind and then the bind forces me to create content.
Yeah, I can relate to
Yeah, I
that.
like that.
We've got a weekly show that does that for us.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about building your audience? So you mentioned, as one of your 7 keys, of course, identifying your audience is key. But okay, you're a small business, you're just getting going. You've decided who you think your audience might be. How do you go about reaching them? Like, I mean, I guess if you have the opportunity to be in Forbes or someplace like this, you may glom a bunch of people. But let's say writing wasn't your thing, but you still need to develop some kind of email list. Do you have any pointers or any ideas on how you might find, well, maybe identify in the first place and then find your audience?
Yeah, I mean, the key is to start with one. Find one person that you want to get on your email list. Get that person on your email list and write for that one person. If you do a good job with that one person, then there are probably a lot of other people who want the same stuff that that one person wants. And that person's going to spread the word, and other people are going to find you. Now, there are a lot of tactics to get more people onto your email list. You can create lead magnets where you're giving something away, like some sort of download checklist or something, if people will give you an email address. There are all sorts of tactics out there, and there are tons of websites with thousands of ideas on how to grow an email list that way. But the core principle here is you got to give value away. If you're not giving value away, then people aren't going to stay subscribed to your email list, or they're not going to follow your social media posts. They're not going to watch your videos. So it's always about value, 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 because otherwise, why am I spending my time absorbing your content if I'm not getting value out of it? Now, value can be entertainment. It can be how to run my business better, how to find a new career, how to lose weight, whatever. But there's got to be something I want in that content. And the mistake that a lot of people make is they write about whatever is interesting to them, and they're all over the place. They lack focus. They're not focused on their genius zone. They're not focused on their audience. They're just kind of writing whatever. And that lack of focus translates to a lack of value. And so nobody's subscribing to their email list, and they're trying to figure out why.
So on your articles and blogs that you write for Forbes, do they give you a topic to stick with, or do they kind of you just go with it and hope they like it, and then kind of do something similar the next month to keep the same listeners?
Yeah, every publication's different, but Forbes is very strict about sticking on your topic. And so it's not that they give you a topic so much, but when you're pitching Forbes and you're trying to get in as a contributor, you go to them and you say, here's my focus. This is what I want to write about. They'll sign you up for that. And then you're stuck in that. Like, you are stuck in that topic and you can't really switch to something else. They call it your swim lane. Got to stay in your swim lane. And you go out of that swim lane and they'll come in and they'll slap you upside the head and say, don't do that. You do that again, we're going to kick you off this platform. So they're really strict about you sticking in that swim lane. And so it might be PR, it might be entrepreneurship. Actually, it's not going to be that broad. It's going to be more niche focused than that. But they're going to say, this is your focus and you've got to stick to it. And if you don't, you're out of here. Because these publishers, they're kind of like collectors of rare animals. They've got their collection. And if you go to them and you say, hey, I've got a rare animal, or I am a rare animal and you don't have me in your collection yet, then they want you. But if they say, I've already got one of you, I don't need another of you, then they're not interested. And if you try to switch swim lanes, it's like you're trying to switch species after they already collected you, and they don't want that.
So you almost have to create a pen name if you want to switch topics.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. So I guess then let's talk about the process of putting together this book. So, I mean, it seems like, and maybe I'm just a little bit biased because I spend most of my time on LinkedIn versus other social media platforms, but it obviously seems to be the best place for doing business and for doing some networking that could contribute to your business. Let's talk about how you decided to, actually put together this course, well, not course, but the 60-day program on LinkedIn Mastery, and why LinkedIn and that sort of thing. I know that you're an influencer on that platform. You also have as many followers as you can get, but let's talk a little bit about why choose LinkedIn, and then about the process of getting this book together.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is the hottest platform right now. And I'm not alone on this. Gary Vaynerchuk's saying the same thing. I mean, it's the only B2B professional social network out there that's big. I mean, there's some small ones, but it's the only big one out there. It's not like Facebook. It's not like Instagram, although it is becoming more like those platforms.
Yeah,
But
I'm actually kind of not happy about that, actually.
yeah.
I don't want to be liking cats on my LinkedIn timeline.
Yeah, but it's still very different. I mean, the tone on LinkedIn is still very different from Facebook and Instagram. And so I love spending time there, and you can manage your audience. You don't have to engage with the other content. So I really like where LinkedIn has gone for the most part. 95% of it's good, 5% of it, yeah. But it's a great platform. The way I got involved and active on LinkedIn, I mean, I've been on this for 10 years, I don't know, since whenever LinkedIn started pretty much. But the way I got really active on it was I had written a Forbes article, and I thought, I wonder what would happen if I copied and pasted this Forbes article onto LinkedIn. LinkedIn has a blogging platform. It's called Articles now. It used to be called Pulse, but now it's just called an article. And so I copied and pasted this Forbes article, put it up on LinkedIn, and I got way more engagement on LinkedIn than I got on Forbes. A lot more. I mean, I got 2,000 views on Forbes, and I got 14,000 views of my article on LinkedIn, and I got tons of comments and attention from it. So that was kind of shocking to me, because I'm thinking Forbes is this platform, this exclusive club that I belong to. And yet here I am on LinkedIn, where anybody can post anything, and I'm getting a lot more value out of LinkedIn than I'm getting out of writing for Forbes. So that got me interested in LinkedIn. I started posting more and more on LinkedIn, and then they yanked the rug out from under me because they changed their algorithm so that articles don't get any attention on LinkedIn. And so then I thought, well, now what do I do? So I started doing some research, and I found a guy named Josh Steimle, and he was getting a lot of attention on his short posts on LinkedIn. So I started looking at what he was doing. He was getting millions of views on his posts. And I started looking at this and saying, okay, what is he doing? How is he writing this? How is he structuring his posts? And I started imitating what he was doing with my content, and I started getting huge results. And I ended up getting millions of views on my posts. I got one post, it got over 3 million views, and it landed me publicity in major publications. I mean, all sorts of great stuff started happening from that. And when I saw that, I thought, on LinkedIn, I can post whatever I want, whenever I want. I have total control. I can have an idea, I can post it a minute later. Where as Forbes and Entrepreneur and all these places, you got to deal with editors and processes and rules and everything. And when I saw that I was getting more attention on LinkedIn than I was getting on these publications, and I had more freedom and I was having more fun, I thought, you know what? I'm just going to focus full time on LinkedIn. And that's what I did, is I just jumped in full on LinkedIn and started investing all my time there. So that was about 2.5, 3 years ago, maybe. And since then, I just have spent hours and hours every day on LinkedIn. And about 6 months ago or so, I thought, I'm going to start just posting tips about how to use LinkedIn, the things that I've learned over the past few years. And I started posting a tip every day. And I got up to 60 tips before I said, I better quit this or I'm never going to stop. And once I had the 60 tips, I thought, I've got enough content here to create a book. So I slapped those 60 tips together. I'm working on expanding all those tips now. And that's the book that is about to come out right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think we've had a couple other LinkedIn marketers and LinkedIn influencers on this show, and I mean, I think most people sort of agree with what you're saying, and I think it's really smart that you're, taking your content and reusing it and sort of, emulating or learning from what other people are doing. I think so many of us get caught in the trap of assuming that we know how to do things the right way and our way must be the way. And so many people aren't maybe, introspective, or they take the time to really analyze what other folks are doing.
Well, even like the algorithm type thing, noticing that the smaller posts get more traction because of the way things changed. You know, someone else had to figure that out first, and if it's out there, you might as well do some research and use it yourself. So.
Yeah, I mean, nobody really invents anything anymore. We make marginal benefits to things, but we're all taking stuff that somebody else has built and then we're adding a little something to it. And that's how progress happens.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's awesome. So can we talk a little bit about, so MWI is your marketing agency, but I know that you're also founder and CEO of a couple other organizations. One of those is Influencer Inc. And so I guess that this is, obviously aimed at developing entrepreneurs and CEOs, those types, into influencers. Can you talk a little bit about that process and what it's like to engage with you guys for that?
Yep. And this word influencer has come to be strongly tied to YouTube, Instagram types of influencers. That's not the type of influencer that I'm working with. So when I'm working with influencers, I'm talking about entrepreneurs and executives who want to become the face of their company, or their marketing department is telling them they need to become the face of their company. And they're just not sure where to start or how to engage or how to do this. And what a lot of these people say is they'll point to Tony Robbins or Gary Vaynerchuk or somebody, and they'll say, I want to do that, but I don't want to be like that guy. And I know exactly what they mean, because when I started doing this and I started writing and speaking, I didn't want to be that guy either. I thought, oh, there are all these guys out there who are kind of loudmouths and showy. And you've got the guy who's standing in front of his private jet or his Lamborghini. It's like, I don't want to be that guy. But at the same time, I saw the value of going out there and talking about what I do and giving value away and serving other people in a bigger way than just running my business. And so I was caught between these two forces of, I want to get out there, but I don't want to be that guy. And my mentor, Cheryl, who got me into Forbes, I brought this up with her at the very beginning, and she said, just get over it. It's not about you. It's about the audience, about serving the audience. Don't focus on yourself. Focus on the audience and what they need, and just help those people, and you'll be fine. And so that's what I've tried to do is, and it's hard sometimes because you do have to focus on yourself a little bit. You might need to build a website. You need to set up your profile the right way on LinkedIn or whatever. You need to put your best foot forward. But the main focus is always, I'm doing this to better serve my audience, to get a message out there, to help people. And so that's really what I walk executives through, is to say, all right, you want to help people. Let's get you out there in a way that you're comfortable with, and let's help you influence more people. My philosophy is that most people are good. If I can help more people to become influential, they'll use that influence to make the world a better place. And that's what motivates me to work with these people, to help them become more influential.
Yeah, I love that. It's, goes back to sort of your number one key, this idea of having a vision and working towards that. I think that's really great. I wonder, so sort of as we're starting to wind down here, I wondered if we could talk maybe about one or two of these different systems of influence that you've come up with. And, you said that most people who are doing well for themselves, either, check several of these boxes or, at least a few of them. I wondered, could we maybe expand a little bit further on one or two of those? We've hit a couple, audience, we talked a little genius zone, things like that, but maybe, I don't know, maybe helping people find their vision or something. Like, let's try and give the audience like one thing that they could maybe walk away with and put into practice.
Sure. So the vision is a great place to start, since it's where you have to start. If you don't get the vision right, nothing else goes right. So there are a lot of different systems for finding your vision or figuring out what you want, what you're trying to work on. Some people, they have a simple daily system where they just write 3 things down that they're going to get done that day. And they've got those 3 goals, and that's kind of the extent of their vision. There are other people who are thinking long term, and they make 1-year plans or 5-year plans or 10-year plans. For example, Rachel Hollis is a super famous author, blogger lady, and She's got a system that's 10-10-1. She says, come up with 10 dreams and 10 dreams that you want to become reality within the next 10 years, and then narrow it down to one that you're going to work on. And you write those things down every single day. You write down all 10 and you work towards one of those becomes your main focus until you check that thing off, and then you go on to the next one. So there are all sorts of different methods for figuring out what you want. For me, the simplest way to look at this is to say, I'm going to write down all the roles that I have in my life. So I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a business partner, I'm a friend. I write all those roles down, personal, professional, everything. And then I look at those roles and I say, okay, what kind of person do I want to be? And not just a loose word like I want to be an awesome dad, but specifically, what does that look like to be an awesome dad? What does an awesome dad do? And I start writing those things down. And as I write down those roles and I write down details about what it looks like to be excellent in each of those roles, then I start coming up with ideas and dreams and goals for what I want to accomplish there. So, for example, as an entrepreneur, I'm talking with a guy up in Boise this week, and I said, okay, what's your vision? What do you want to accomplish? And he said, I'm already doing about 100 million a year with my businesses, but I want to get to over $1 billion. Okay, great. So 10-year goal, he wants to build $1 billion business empire through real estate investments and technology investments and all these things. So that's his vision. Now, that's one vision amongst many others that he has about being a good father and husband and everything else, but that's one vision that he has. And so we can look at that and say, okay, if that's your vision, now what's your genius zone that applies to that vision that's going to help you get there? Who's your audience that you need to influence that is going to get you to that point? What kind of content is going to impact that audience so that they do things, so that they're buying your homes or renting your apartments or whatever it is that gets you there? So then we work from that vision through the rest of the 7 systems, and that helps him come up with an action plan on exactly what he's going to do to get there. But yeah, it all starts with that vision. And there are lots of different systems, and it could be as simple or as complex as you want to make it, really.
Nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. Super helpful. All right. So to kind of wrap up, where can people find out more about you? Where can they read you? Where can they do whatever you'd like them to do?
My website, joshsteimle.com.
There you go. Perfect.
And that is just like it sounds. Here, I've got it spell. I want to spell it right. We've got
just like it sounds.
Yeah. EIMLE.com, joshsteimle.com.
And before you leave, what are you listening to or reading right now? What's your studying points right now?
So I am actually, this is kind of funny to admit to, but I'm reading a book by Oprah right now.
Oh.
I've never read a book by Oprah before. I've never watched Oprah, but my wife read this book. She's like, you got to read this book. It's really good. So I was like, hey, Oprah's an influential person. I should probably read this book. So it's called What I Know for sure. And it's a great book. It's awesome. I'm loving this book. It's got some really good stuff in it. So if anybody's out there and they're saying, I want to learn how to become more influential, go read the story about Oprah, because it's really inspiring. I really like her now.
That's awesome. Well, cool. Well, hey, Josh, thanks so much for making this work. I'm glad we could get our schedules to align and get you on here. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, guys.
Yep.
All right. Take care.
Thanks. And thanks to everybody who tuned in on the live stream and who will download this in a couple weeks when it airs. So, and thanks to just everybody who supports the show. And I guess we'll catch y'all next time.